This is the behavioral secret to transforming uncomfortable small talk into real connections. Imagine the following scene. It is Monday morning. You are waiting for the elevator at the office or waiting for your order in line at Starbucks, and suddenly, a colleague or acquaintance approaches. The smile on the person's face is the big warning sign. Before it is possible to grab the cell phone to fake urgency in an email, the inevitable happens, and that terrible small talk begins about how the weather suddenly got cold or about the comments on the weekend football game. For those who have a quieter and more reserved profile, the real nightmare is never the lack of what to say, but rather the enormous drain of social energy that small talk causes in a matter of minutes. The mind enters a state of constant calculation, desperately trying to find a polite escape route while the social battery plummets. Modern society, especially the American corporate dynamic that so values hallway conversations, seems to demand a constant extroversion from everyone. The big problem is that trying to escape small talk at all costs often creates an image of arrogance or coldness, which can sabotage networking and professional growth. However, it is entirely possible to apply a practical formula to navigate these obligatory interactions quickly and courteously. The goal is not to change who you are, but rather to deliver the exact tools to master small talk, ending it with elegance to be able to return to what really matters. But to create this invisible armor and disarm small talk quickly, the first step is to understand the hidden gears that make them exist. To understand how to escape this social trap without generating friction, it is first necessary to understand why small talk exists. Anthropologically speaking, they function as an essential social lubricant of humanity. In a highly dynamic and networking-focused culture like the American one, from classic interactions around the corporate office water cooler to quick encounters in conference hallways, human beings use small talk to signal that they are not a threat. It is a primitive security protocol disguised as comments about chaotic traffic on the freeway or the sudden change in temperature during autumn. For the general public, exchanging these quick words is just the equivalent of a verbal handshake. However, for more reserved profiles, the simple beginning of small talk triggers an immediate alarm of exhaustion. Neuroscience explains this clearly. The brain of a quieter person processes information through longer neural pathways, consuming much more organic energy to decode external social stimuli and the surrounding environment. Therefore, feeling a strong aversion to small talk does not mean there is something wrong, antisocial, or weird about this behavior. The biological preference for deep and meaningful connections makes superficial chat immediately perceived by the nervous system as a waste of cognitive resources. The mental exhaustion that follows a party or corporate event is a real and scientifically valid phenomenon. Social fatigue does not happen due to a deficiency in communication skills, but rather due to the extreme superficiality demanded during these exchanges in elevators and waiting rooms. Understanding that the constant discomfort with small talk is just a natural neurological response brings an immense sense of relief and validation. The focus ceases to be a frustrated attempt to fix one's own personality, becoming instead about how to master the social game to preserve mental peace and useful time. And the most efficient primary strategy to protect this social battery and take control effortlessly consists of using the psychology of the interlocutor in favor of the listener. The most efficient primary strategy to survive small talk is to apply the intelligent return technique. The fundamental psychological principle behind any human interaction is that people love to talk about themselves. When unwanted small talk begins in a corporate office hallway or a doctor's waiting room, the initial instinct of a more reserved profile is usually to respond with short, monosyllabic phrases. The problem is that answering only yes or no forces the other person to create a new topic to fill the silence, prolonging the interaction time. Instead, the ideal tactic to master small talk is to completely invert the dynamic. making the interlocutor take control and talk for 80% of the time. This simple change in posture preserves the social battery and transfers all the cognitive weight of the interaction to the other person. To apply this technique during small talk, simply use behavioral mirroring and strategic open-ended questions. Mirroring, a resource widely taught by high-level negotiators in the United States, simply consists of repeating the last 2 or 3 words the person said, using a tone of voice that denotes curiosity. If the coworker starts small talk saying they spent the Thanksgiving holiday driving for hours to visit family in rural Texas, the ideal response would be just to repeat, "In rural Texas?" Immediately, the interlocutor's brain interprets this repetition as genuine interest. As a result, the person continues to develop their own story for a few more minutes, while the listener can just subtly agree, without spending mental energy elaborating complex answers. In addition to mirroring, substituting closed questions for open ones is the definitive tool to neutralize the wear caused by small talk. Instead of asking if the 4th of July barbecue was good, the ideal is to question what the big highlight of the event was. The person feels deeply validated, the interaction flows without those awkward pauses, and the cognitive effort required of the quieter person remains absolutely minimal. Thus, the inevitable small talk becomes much easier to tolerate in the work or social environment. However, if the other person's speech threatens to extend indefinitely or become exhausting, it is fundamental to know how to take the reins of the situation very subtly. The next logical step for absolute social mastery requires learning exactly how to change the route of this dialogue without causing any kind of emotional friction. The next logical step to assume absolute control and not become a mere hostage of small talk is to master the art of strategic subject redirection. When a neighbor on the sidewalk or a coworker insists on prolonging small talk about the unpredictability of the weather in the American Midwest, or about chaotic traffic on the interstate, the mental energy of someone who is more reserved begins to evaporate quickly. The most common mistake in this moment of exhaustion is simply nodding and silently hoping for the interaction to end soon. Instead of passively accepting this prolonged wear, the secret is to use the initial boring topic as a narrative bridge. Redirection transforms monotonous, small talk into a terrain where the quiet profile feels much more comfortable and in control of the situation. The bridge technique consists of taking the last word or the central concept of the interlocutor's sentence and connecting it to a subject that really sparks interest, or that facilitates a quick closing. For example, if during that small talk in the office hallway, someone starts complaining endlessly about the subway delay in New York or Chicago, it is possible to validate the frustration and immediately create the bridge. Transportation really has been impossible lately, which reminds me that I need to run right now to send an important report before the next team meeting. This simple sentence validates the other person's emotion, ends the cycle of small talk about public transportation, and already establishes a time limit without causing any offense. Another brilliant application of redirection is transforming superficial, small talk into slightly more analytical discussions, where introverts usually perform much better. If the initial subject is the finals of the basketball or baseball championship, and this is an uninteresting topic, the bridge can be subtly directed to the team's strategy or to a good recent sports documentary that is trending on streaming services. By pulling the subject into a field of greater density, real interest replaces the simple social obligation to keep the chat alive. However, there will be moments when not even the best narrative bridge will be able to save the available social energy, and the only viable option will be to end the dialogue as quickly as possible. It is exactly in these critical hours that it becomes absolutely essential to have an elegant and perfectly structured exit plan. When not even the best narrative bridge is capable of maintaining social energy and exhaustion is imminent, it is exactly in these critical hours that it becomes absolutely essential to master an elegant exit plan to end inevitable small talk. The great dread of someone who is quiet or introverted is not initiating contact, but rather getting stuck in small talk for a long time, without finding an exit door that is not impolite. In American corporate environments or neighborhood interactions, where the culture of extreme politeness and small talk is very strong, abruptly cutting someone off in the middle of a story about vacationing in Florida or climate change in Seattle is interpreted as a severe communication failure. Therefore, the most important tool in the arsenal of those who wish to escape these empty social interactions is the other-focused exit kit. The main secret consists of ending small talk using verbal triggers that demonstrate respect for the interlocutor's time, masking one's own urgent need to leave. The first step of this exit kit to survive exhausting small talk is to apply the golden rule, blaming one's own responsibilities while protecting the other person's ego. Phrases like "I don't want to delay you anymore," or "I know you have a packed schedule today, so I won't take up any more of your time" are magical for politely interrupting any flow of small talk in the office break room or a hotel hallway. This approach works because, instead of focusing on one's own impatience or exhaustion, it inverts the protagonism, transforming the escape from small talk into an act of extreme courtesy and corporate empathy. In addition to this exit focused on valuing the other's time, the silent bodily transition plays a fundamental and almost invisible role in disarming the conversation in a completely natural way. Even before announcing the exit verbally and escaping the mental whirlwind of small talk, the physical posture needs to signal urgency. Subtly taking half a step back, gently turning one of the shoulders or feet toward the office or elevator door, and stopping the continuous nodding in agreement unconsciously prepares the other person's brain for the inevitable end of the small talk. When this slight alteration in body language aligns perfectly with the verbal promise to focus on work again, or grab an urgent coffee at Starbucks before a board meeting, the interruption of the conversation seems incredibly organic, despite the practical mastery of the escape kit providing the desired social freedom. The great remaining question is how to execute all these movements at high speed without ever seeming emotionally unavailable to the world. Despite the practical mastery of the escape kit providing the desired social freedom, the great remaining doubt is how to execute all these movements at high speed without ever seeming emotionally unavailable to the corporate or social world. The line between being efficient in daily interactions and seeming like a cold or inaccessible person work can seem extremely thin during the inevitable Monday morning small talk about Super Bowl games or weekend television shows. But mastering the interruption of small talk is not about adopting a rude personality. On the contrary, the most sophisticated techniques for ending small talk are based on the combination of instant emotional validation and a deliberately friendly eye contact, which immediately neutralizes any impression of arrogance in American offices from New York to Los Angeles. The number one objection that prevents introverts from simply walking away halfway through or in the company parking lot is the gigantic fear of becoming known as unfriendly figures. To ensure that the exit from small talk is never misinterpreted, the final psychological secret before cutting the interaction and returning to the routine is short-term validation. This crucial step ensures that the social door remains fully open for future interactions that are more fruitful and less exhausting. If the subject of the undesirable small talk is focused on a quick personal problem of the desk neighbor or the human resources manager, such as the difficult basement renovation or the complicated IRS income tax process in April, never simply end the conversation by turning your back. The last thing you should say when ending small talk is a brief empathetic comment that closes the verbal loop perfectly. The psychological impact of hearing something like "I hope the situation improves quickly. It was great talking to you before the start of our busy week," said genuinely, and with a mild smile, disarms even the most prolix or insistent talkers in the corporation. By ending small talk with a strong emphasis on validation and empathy, and not just on cold distancing or excessive haste to answer a Slack message, the final perception of the interlocutor will continue to be highly positive, thus consolidating your complete social armor against unnecessary interactions, and all this in a fluid manner. By consolidating this new social armor so fluidly, the true meaning of mastering small talk reveals itself not as an act of corporate falsehood, but rather as a vital mechanism for energy management. For quieter and more reserved profiles, learning to navigate and end these superficial interactions is exactly what guarantees the preservation of mental focus for the projects that really matter. Surviving small talk at the water cooler, in the hallway, or at any networking event does not require a forced change of personality, but only the tactical application of these behavioral communication tools. With the practice of this guide, the dreaded small talk ceases to be an exhausting drain on productivity and becomes just brief points of social contact, managed with total control, elegance, and politeness. And now that the secret has been revealed, leave a comment below telling what the most creative excuse, or even the worst excuse, that has ever been used to quickly escape from that endless small talk was.